You're very welcome to this seminar presenting the 14th survey of the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation carried out by the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. And we're joined today, again, as usual, by our usual correspondent, Ben Rosher, who's going to take us through the detailed findings of the survey. My name's Aidan Campbell. I'm recently employed as the new Research and Programme Development Manager here in the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. And I'm just going to take a moment to share screen. So, as I was saying, this is the 14th quarterly survey on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation after Brexit. And I'm just going to do a couple of introductory slides. To remind ourselves really of the purpose of the survey and where it came from. So I suppose the survey for the centre it's held on a quarterly basis, and it's a vital means to give us an understanding of the extent to which the necessary conditions for North-South cooperation are being maintained, and how relations between civic society organisations and local authorities on the island of Ireland and Great Britain are being safeguarded following the end of the Brexit transition period and during the implementation of the Ireland-Northern Ireland Protocol, or Windsor Framework as it's known now. So the survey is aimed specifically at civic society organisations and local authorities. And that's important to remember. So that's a core group of respondents and organisations that the survey is aimed at. And that's done specifically in light of the fact that the mapping exercise of North-South cooperation undertaken in 2017 by the UK and EU may have overlooked some of the cooperation that those organisations are involved in. So further areas of informal, local and community level cooperation may not have been captured by this exercise. And that was acknowledged during that mapping exercise by the UK government and the EU. And we think it's really important. That's a really foundational part of doing North-South cooperation, what's happening at grassroots level in civic society and local authorities. And we think it's taking the view that it's really important that what happens at grassroots level in terms of cross-border cooperation, both North-South and East-West, is monitored and how different issues are affecting that cooperation. So as usual, I mean, this is the 14th survey. These surveys have been going on now for 3 years, I think. And we're enormously grateful to all those who have responded to the survey, especially those who've just responded in previous quarters. And Ben probably will talk a bit more during his presentation of the findings about the number of organisations and sort of people a cohort of people who have responded to the survey since its inception. And that gives us a really important sort of baseline in terms of tracking how sentiment has changed in relation to North-South and East-West cooperation over the past 3 years. But in saying that, I suppose it's also a call out in these seminars that we usually do to ask people to keep on responding to future surveys. So without your sort of time and commitment and ongoing help in responding to this survey, we wouldn't have the detailed information to be able to feed into policymakers and decision makers in terms of how organisations at the coalface are feeling about grassroots or about North-South and East-West cooperation. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, which I suppose we always emphasise in these seminars. But also important to say that the issues raised and the information that this survey provides is used by the Centre for Cross-Border Studies as we work with other organisations to protect North-South and East-West relations and cooperation, especially through the ad hoc group for North-South and East-West cooperation, which the Centre convenes. So the issues raised in the survey are brought to those responsible for ensuring the necessary conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation are being maintained. Suppose that the protocol or the Windsor framework implementation issues, the issues that are the detail and I suppose the depth of the issues that are coming up through the survey are being brought to the tables that we sit at when we talk to officials and politicians, and both from the UK government and the European Commission, in terms of how organisations working in communities are feeling around North-South cooperation, what the problems are, what the challenges are, but also, I suppose, the progress that they're making. And I suppose with that introduction, I'm now going to hand over to Ben, who's our usual correspondent on the survey, who has looked at this data in detail, and also always, as always, thanks to Ben for taking the time to do this. And so I'm just going to hand over to Ben now, and then we'll have a bit of conversation at the end when Ben takes us through the detail of the survey. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Hello, everyone. Hello to those of you who have joined us before, and welcome to anybody who's joining us for the first time. So, as Aidan said, today I'm going to give a general overview of the results from our 14th quarterly survey on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. A fuller analysis is available in the research briefing, which will be shortly out on the website. But today I'm going to focus on giving an explanation of the data overall and a breakdown on the respondents to the survey. And then I'll head into the substantive parts of the analysis, focusing on the experiences and perceptions of cross-border contacts, cooperation and collaboration, both in the North-South and East-West dimensions. And so, as will become clear, this is the second survey that we have conducted since the return of Stormont, and we are still seeing some noticeable impacts from that, which are generally positive impacts. So we'll pick up on those as we work through the data. So if we move on to the next slide, there we go. In this round of the survey, 89% of respondents have completed at least one previous round of the survey, and that the survey has been repeated every quarter since the beginning of 2021. So as Aidan said, we're halfway through year 3 now, and that there are a consistently high number of repeat respondents. We are in a good position to start to infer the shape of some trends regarding the views and experiences of the protocol and the Windsor framework and the general post-Brexit landscape in a practical sense with a very good degree of clarity. All of the insights, or the quantitative insights provided here, are developed by the inclusion of qualitative responses to the central contextual questions. And this allows for more nuanced and more granular insights into how respondents are experiencing the changing political, social, regulatory and material conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation, as well as their suggestions for improvements to these environments. And all of this information has proved invaluable in painting a more detailed picture of the current context for cross-border cooperation and collaboration. As Aidan said, we don't just take these results and keep them in a drawer. They do get fed back up to policymakers, and so the more voices we have, the more information, the more detail we can feed back into policymakers to hopefully improve conditions across these islands. As always, we need to appreciate the respondents to this and all rounds of surveys are expert practitioners. They have a wealth of insight, experience and expertise in cross-border cooperation and collaboration. And these people are living with these experiences day in, day out. And so all of the results here should be considered with that level of expertise in mind. Now, the data is collected by a self-selected survey during May 2024 and gathered 28 responses in total. And 89%, as I say that they've completed the survey in a previous quarter. This time round, 50% of respondents were based in the Republic of Ireland, 39% in Northern Ireland, and 11% had a presence on both sides of the border. And so while responses from the public outweigh those from the north, and that's the pattern we've seen recently, there is still quite a good balance between the jurisdictions. But if we move on now to look at specifically the north-south dimension, in this quarter, 75% of respondents have had meetings with organisations in the other jurisdiction on the island of Ireland. For 54%, their level of contact this quarter has been the same level as the last, and it's increased for 46% of respondents. Interestingly, really, for the first time since we've started conducting these surveys, 100% of respondents reported that meetings with organisations in the other jurisdiction discussed challenges to cross-border cooperation, and this was on occasion for 62% and to a significant extent for 38% of respondents. Well, it is to be welcomed that dialogue is open and that issues are being discussed. It is still concerning that so much time is being spent attempting to resolve issues primarily arising from Brexit and the potential divergence between North and South. The nature of the challenges are always varied, and this quarter we've seen them focus particularly on concerns around a lack of funding for cross-border projects. One example, respondents said that there are concerns and issues around insurance when working cross-border, sharing of data of cross-border, and engaging migrants in projects who can't cross the border. Obviously, there has always been a hard border for certain groups of migrants, but this has become slightly more intense since Brexit, I guess. At present, 93% of respondents are currently involved in cross-border collaborations with a partner in the other jurisdiction, and 82% of respondents are actively considering new collaborative projects. So as ever, we can see the North-South dimension for collaboration is still very robust. 58% of respondents who are presently engaged in cross-border collaboration have reported that they were in receipt of funding for those projects, with most respondents reported that at least one of their funding sources was the Irish government. If we look now towards the contextual environment for North-South cooperation and collaboration, in terms of the political context, 29% believe that it's improved since the previous quarter, and 68% said stayed more or less the same. This very much needs to be considered in the context that in the 13th quarterly survey last 3 months ago, 90% of respondents reported an improvement in the political context, and that this has either improved or stayed the same is most certainly to be welcomed. When we have asked respondents to develop on these answers, they pointed almost unanimously to the restoration of the Northern Ireland Assembly as the reason behind these improved conditions, although there was a note of caution because of, as during the time of this fieldwork, the general election for the UK was on the horizon, so that posed some uncertainty. One respondent said that in Northern Ireland, they will have a general election in coming weeks, so that might have an impact. And one has also raised concerns that the support for North-South engagement is or in their experience, is predominantly coming from the South, and so that's something that we might need to look into a bit more in depth. Looking towards the social context, 71% of respondents say that it has remained the same on the previous quarter, and 21% say it's improved. And again, this needs to be considered within the context of the large sense of improvement we found in the previous quarterly survey. And so that there is a level of stability following on from the sense of optimism we saw last quarter. This is a promising sign. And again, a large reason for this, we've asked people to develop on these perceptions and experiences, is because of the return of Stormont. Somebody has said that there is increasing appreciation of the fact of the impact of collaborative North-South work within the sector, in our view. So there's just a general sense of optimism in that it's being recognised as a necessary and vital part of life here. Now, in terms of the regulatory context, 68% say that it has remained the same compared to last quarter, and 7% say it's improved. Respondents have reported that there is unfortunately less cooperation on workforce issues, and again, this needs to be considered when the fieldwork is being done. One has said that the Rwanda decision has highlighted that migration cross-border north to south is a relatively new factor that might have an impact on relations. And while the new Labour government have scrapped the Rwanda policy, it has nevertheless highlighted the potential for divergence. And obviously we only need to look towards the work that the Northwest Migrants Forum does on trying to understand the border and how it operates for third country nationals and non-EU nationals. Now, with regards to the North-South material context, 75% of respondents believe it is the same as the previous quarter, and 7% say it has improved. One respondent has said that insurance might become a bigger problem as divergence increases. And similarly, another said that banking is an issue that needs to be addressed. So there are concerns around how finance will operate in the event that the UK and Ireland diverge moving forward post-Brexit. We've also asked respondents for any suggestions they have for improving the conditions for cooperation and collaboration out with these general contexts we put to them. And there have been suggestions for improving cross-border opportunities for young people and improved information around funding and finance. And one respondent said that a bit more information on insurance, medical issues, and what food can be taken over the border, and about when you travel across the border. And another said it would be good to see some exploratory north-south work on the possible return of Northern Ireland to the EU Horizon Project's bids, applications in education and cultural activities with an emphasis on trans and interdisciplinarity. So again, more educational capacity building for north-south projects. If we look now towards the east-west dimension, this quarter, only 39% of respondents have reported having meetings with organisations in Great Britain. What is more concerning is that 68% of respondents say that this is the same level of contact as the previous quarter, and only 21% say that this level of contact has improved, has increased on the previous quarter. 64% of respondents have reported that meetings with partners in Great Britain discuss challenges to cooperation, on occasion for 24%, or to a significant extent for 36%. And the challenges raised this quarter were predominantly focused around issues on post-Brexit data sharing and on regulatory issues. One respondent said that the central issue discussed with organisations in GB was the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill and how that could impact on East-West and North-West cooperation. Another said that Brexit has resulted in the Wales-Ireland Interreg programme ceasing. There is thus no financial incentive to work across the two jurisdictions. They said the Welsh Government wishes to maintain and build on existing links between organisations in Wales and Ireland, both north and south, and discussions east-west are ongoing to do this, but obviously the financial landscape makes this more challenging than it otherwise would be. This quarter, 43% of respondents say that they are currently involved in collaboration with a Great Britain-based organisation, but only 39% are actively considering new collaborative projects once these projects come to an end. And this is an issue that we come up against in every one of the surveys, to be honest. I don't think there has been a time when it hasn't been quite prominent. And this time only a third of respondents currently engaged in East-West collaborative projects have reported that their organisation has been in receipt of fundings for those projects specifically. And let's say this is something we've seen consistently since we've started these surveys in 2021. We've not seen improvement, and this is something that really does need to be fed back into policy and decision makers to begin to address the East-West cooperation and collaboration. This is something that you and I will discuss towards the end, Aidan.
Yeah.
Now, looking towards the perceptions of the contextual environment for cooperation and collaboration on the East-West dimension, 61% of respondents believe that the political context has remained the same on the previous quarter, but 25% say it's deteriorated compared to only 4% who say it's improved. Now, when we have asked respondents to expand on this, they've indicated the uncertainty caused by the general election and around issues concerning migration and specifically the Rwanda policy. One respondent said that the decision for a general election in the UK will have an impact on political relations, and that the Rwanda decision in the UK had an impact in terms of driving migration through Northern Ireland into Ireland, and this is a potential political issue. And political change at Westminster and establishment of a Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly has been actually promising, and there is a need for political lobbying regarding the Community Ownership Fund. And so obviously it's too early to tell how the new Labour government will act and will be received in Northern Ireland with regards to cross-border cooperation and collaboration, but those over the last 3 months were causing concern because of the uncertainty that was generated. Looking towards the social context, 71% of people report that it's remained the same on the previous quarter, and 14% report that it's deteriorated. And when we've asked people to develop on this, one respondent has said that there is sort of willingness by civil society organisations to engage and to try and build on these things, but they're lacking full support from the government as they need more high-level support in order to push these agendas. In terms of the regulatory context, 64% of respondents say that it stayed the same and 18% says deteriorated. And finally, with the material context, 71% report that it's remained the same and 21% say that they do not know how it has changed, which having that level of proportion around uncertainty is obviously not ideal, and drilling into why that may be the case is something that we need to do more work on. When we've asked for other suggestions, respondents have highlighted the need for closer relationships between London and Dublin in order to focus on advantages in order to foster relationships. But that has been tempered with caution, with another person saying that there is no point in trying to build these things until there is a stable government with which to build those relationships. Now, following the return of the Assembly on the 3rd of February 2024, this is the second round of the survey in which we've asked respondents what changes they have already started to notice and what they would like to see from the new Assembly and Executive. And there are more of these in the report, but just as a sample, one person has said that although we would hope this might change, we have seen no substantive evidence of how the NI Assembly and Executive are actively and publicly supporting North, South and East West cooperation. We would like to see greater evidence of this in terms of public demonstrations of their support. Another has said that overall, there appears to be a better relationship in terms of North-South cooperation between political leaders, both in the South and North and in all UK areas. Both in the South and North and all UK areas are in election mode, which means limited decision making and a wait and see time. Once the political picture emerges, then the change that is necessary is improved strategic cooperation between North-South and ultimately East-West. And another has said that a more positive atmosphere is now evident in certain sections of our work, and there are increasing opportunities to work. So just bringing this together and as a conclusion, last quarter, we saw that the return of the Executive Assembly to Stormont had led to increased optimism, both in terms of North-South and East-West cooperation and collaboration. This quarter, that enthusiasm has largely been sustained in terms of the North-South dimension, but noticeably less so in terms of East-West. For now, we can attribute that, at least in a large part, to the general election. And because the UK was in election mode during the fieldwork for this, that obviously caused some disruption. Now that it is over, we need to wait and see how the new Labour government responds to the needs of civic society across these islands. And so there are some early signs for optimism. The Rwanda policy and its impact on the island of Ireland featured heavily in responses. And now that Labour have announced this end, that's something that will hopefully go some way to restoring confidence. However, a lack of funding for East-West projects and general East-West cooperation and collaboration has been a long-standing concern, and this is something that the new government must be pressed to address. And I think I will finish on that note. Thank you very much.
Ben, thanks so much for taking us through that. I'm just going to stop the share at this stage. Yeah, great. Ben, as I said, thanks a million for taking us through that. That was really helpful. And just a reminder, as Ben said during his presentation, there will be a detail, if you want to really drill down into the detail of the survey and the findings, there will be a briefing which will appear on our website, I think, later today. If it's not up there already, you can read into that. Ben, one of the things that I wanted to pick up with you, and as you said in your presentation, it's almost a constant, well, a fairly regular theme, was this lack of confidence around East-West cooperation. And the fact that so few groups only, reported an increase in East-West cooperation. And I suppose that stands against, both in the last survey, I suppose we had the Safeguarding the Union had talked about Intertrade UK being set up, a UK East-West Council, And I know even in recent, like outside the scope of the survey, obviously, on the field work, the King's Speech is now talking about a new Council of the Nations and Regions, renew opportunities for the Prime Minister, the heads of the devolved governments and mayors. So there's all this sort of, moves for more institutions, infrastructure around East-West relations, but that's very much balanced against a lack of confidence or a lack of support or a lack of funding at local or at grassroots level. And there just seems to be that sort of mismatch between what's being said, I suppose, in the public sphere as opposed to how people are experiencing East-West cooperation on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's really part of it. To be generous, these things take time to filter down. I think part of the problem that remains there is, as you said, there's been lots of positive sounds and lots of nascent projects which need to be supported with the political will to come to fruition. But there's also the concern that sort of some of the strands for institutions that we should have, British Irish Council, aren't necessarily working to their full capacity in any case. And so we could be doing more with the institutions that we are supposed to have had post 98 in any case. And so there's cautious optimism, but there is definitely more that could be done immediately.
Okay. The other thing that I was picking up from the findings and from your presentation was that generally optimistic mood on North-South cooperation has been maintained, which is great.
Yep.
And obviously there was a huge bounce in that in the last quarter, largely related to the obviously related to the restoration of Stormont and the Executive and Assembly here. But I suppose in terms of improvements required for better North-South cooperation, respondents are coming back noting so while the mood music and the big picture people are feeling a bit more positive around that, they're noting practical support needed at local level in terms of banking and insurance were two examples that you mentioned. So there seems to be, it's almost like that in between time in that we're glad to see the Assembly and institutions back up and running. We're hoping that that's going to, lead to a better atmosphere for North-South cooperation. But on a practical level, we're still, finding these practical difficulties working across border. Would that be a fair way of summing it up?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we started to see in the last quarter, because from 2021 up until end of 2023, the predominant concerns were high level stuff. It was basically, we don't have an assembly, and so there's no governmental direction, there's no strategy, and there's no real framework within which to work these things, which was very important, but it meant that everything was framed in the abstract. Since someone has come back to it in the last quarter and this quarter, people have been able to get back to the nuts and bolts of daily work. And so rather than worrying about these big high level things, go, okay, great, this is back. Now here's what we actually need in order to be able to do the very specific practical things that we want to do. And so it will take time to come through it, but it is nice from our perspective, at least now that we're getting those very specific requests and very specific needs, that when we have our meetings, we can feed those back up and say, right, you're back here, this is grand, this is wonderful, here's what you need to do now.
Absolutely. And just on that, I suppose that maybe one of the final things I wanted to pick up maybe was that, and I saw it was coming through maybe more in the briefing than the presentation, this idea of financial difficulty of administering cross-border projects and specific issues around the imbalances in co-funding as Northern Ireland departments are operating within more constrained budgets. I think that was mentioned by a few people. I think that's on the survey.
Yeah, it is. Well, funding is always a concern, and people are always competing for funding. And I think it's not something that's likely to go away, but it's good that it stays on the agenda for the purposes of lobbying and trying to make sure that civic society and cross-border cooperation gets the slice of the pie that they need in order to continue to do this work, because it is vital work.
Okay. Well, Ben, I think unless there's any other final points you want to make, I think we'll wrap it up there. But just to thank you and to thank again, just to reinforce our thanks to all the respondents for engaging with the survey, providing us with vital information, detailed and nuanced information in terms of the challenges and opportunities of cross-border cooperation, both north-south and east-west. And we'd encourage you to keep on engaging with the survey, with the quarterly survey in the next quarter. We're hopefully we will see a bit more detail and drill down on some of these issues in terms of specifically looking at what the new UK government will bring in terms of East-West cooperation, but I suppose also wider in terms of their declared intention for a reset of EU and UK relationship. Now, obviously, as Ben noted earlier, these things will all take time to filter through to organisations on the ground, but hopefully that will be fertile material for future surveys. So thanks everyone. Ben, thanks again for your input and your time, and we'll finish at that.